begin the QB Power Hour webinar series. The QB Power Hour is a free bi-weekly webinar series for accounting professionals presented by Matthew Fulton and Dan DeLong, who are very passionate about the industry, QuickBooks, and apps that integrate with QuickBooks. You can find out all the details about the webinar series at qbpowerhour.com. So without further ado, here's Matthew and Dan.
Thank you very much. It's good to see everybody here again today.
Likewise, welcome everybody to another QB Power Hour. We wanted to start on time because we have a lot of stuff to do and unpack, because we're going to be talking about bridging the apps using Zapier to enhance QuickBooks online integrations. A bit about ourselves. My name is Dan DeLong, owner at Dan With and School of Bookkeeping. I worked at Intuit for nearly 18 years, co-hosting today, as well as the workshop Wednesdays over at schoolofbookkeeping.com. There's a link there for the Facebook group, which is closing in on 20,000 members. And I appreciate everyone that has been reporting the posts that have been spammy in the Facebook group. It's really hard sometimes to manage those people from not getting in.
It's a lot of work.
We have all sorts. Yeah. Labor of love over at the Facebook group. So appreciate everyone doing that. If you want to be a moderator so that you too can ban spammers from the Facebook group, please let me know. Matthew.
Hello, everybody. Matthew Fulton here. My friends call me Spot. I am the founder of Parkway Business Solutions, also known as Cloud Apps Inc., one of the creators of the Facebook group QB Community Live. We are not at the 20,000 mark. We actually at the smaller group, but keep it that way on purpose because, like you're talking about, it's sometimes it's difficult to manage everybody's best intentions inside there. Also do Blueprints for Business series, and I am a total workflow nerd, which means I like working with the API, working with app companies, and trying to help them better understand how they can actually integrate their products to QuickBooks Online. And how did I get the nickname Spot? Super fast version of it is I have a skin disease called vitiligo. Changes the pigment in your skin and turns it white in places. And when I was a freshman in high school, I grew up and moved a lot. Every place I moved, I always had to re-explain it. When I was a freshman in high school, I moved to Hemet, California, and they said, everybody has a nickname. You have to have a nickname. And I said, how about Spot? So it stuck, took it with me along the way, and it turned negative into a positive. So it's a positive thing for me. Thank you for asking.
And that is what we love about you, Spot, is that you do in all things, not just with that, but like anything Intuit or QuickBooks, you always have a nice, objectively positive view of things. So I really appreciate your perspective as well. A little bit about the QB Power Hour. It's every other Tuesday at 12 noon Eastern. We are eligible for CPE credits through Earmark. So if you didn't catch the intro video there's a QR code to check that out and download the app. Most of our prior QB Power Hours, since we've started this, are available for CPE credit. You can check out the channel on Earmark. Typically, they're 5 to 7 days after the webinar. There will be a new listing there on Earmark to get your CPE credit. We're going to be talking about Zapier today. So if you have specific questions about Zapier and how it works and whatnot, please put them in the Q&A. So it's a lot easier for us to follow up and keep track of those questions, because as I can see, the chat is going by. I don't get alerts on those things in the comments. Please put those in there, and Matthew and our helpers are trying to make sure that we get everyone's perspective included. So we can put that you can put that kind of stuff in the comments, like what do you eat for Mardi Gras, since it is Fat Tuesday. Got my Mardi Gras shirt on today.
That's what Fat Tuesday's about. I thought it was just really big tacos. I didn't know what Fat Tuesday was, but anyway. Okay.
It's Tuesday and I'm here. All right. And we also got the QB Power Hour store. You can check that out if you feel so inclined. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about. So what's on the agenda today? So we're going to set the stage on, I guess this is a Shakespeare reference here, with to zap or not to zap. That's the question. So we'll unpack what's the need for Zapier, and then we'll talk about what Zapier actually is, and just a brief overview of the under the hood of Zapier, and then we'll talk about some real world examples. So first off, I just wanted to talk about why I wanted to do a webinar on Zapier, because here this is the QB Power Hour, and we're talking about a completely different application altogether. I went to Intuit Connect last year, and Blake, who did our little intro for us over at Earmark, he did a wonderful breakout session on how to use or how to automate advisory types of things using a couple applications. One was Process Street, which is a workflow automation, task manager, practice management type of thing, and ChatGPT and Zapier. And it was really interesting to me that it was one of the larger breakout sessions, so probably about 200 or so capacity that was there. And a lot of the questions that he was taking, people could submit them, and a lot of them had to do with just some confusion about what Zapier actually is. So that's why we wanted to do this, is to make sure that people have a good understanding of what Zapier can actually do and how it can enhance some of these integrations. Because Matthew, you could probably attest to this pretty well. When an app company says works with QuickBooks, and I'm using air quotes there,
Yeah.
the devil is always in the details. Yep. And it may be not the kind of integration that you want it to have working with QuickBooks. And Zapier is a way to be able to augment some of those things when you're dealing with apps that connect to QuickBooks. What would you say? We're going to go into what it is and everything, but what are your thoughts on that?
I would agree. So I've always felt that Zapier is a great product to help app companies test out what needs to be integrated to QuickBooks Online. It's a more cost-effective way to connect to multiple different apps across the app sphere all at once. And then once you see that there's engagement, people are actually trying to use certain parts of it, then maybe you spend the money through development to do a direct integration. And we're going to talk very briefly about the difference between a direct integration and one-way versus two-way, some of that stuff. We can dive in and show what that is.
Let's start off with the first poll question. I've lost it. There it is. So the first one is just to set the stage of how familiar are you with Zapier? And that's the first thing, is how do you pronounce the word?
Zapier. I always heard Zapier makes you happier. Zapier makes you crazier.
Exactly. That's their slogan or byline. It's Zapier makes you happier. So we'll talk a little bit about that. It looks like, looking at people answering, it looks like never used it is 71% of the folks that have taken the polling question. Wow, I just brain. No, I haven't started drinking yet.
We've had two people mention Give Butter in the comments just already, talking about a nonprofit and using that. So I'm going to have to take a note and check out that application as well. So
let me go ahead and end the poll here. Looks like most people share it. Yeah, so 68% never used it. 17 maybe heard about it before and like a little update, and then enough to be dangerous. I think that's the trouble area, I think, where we could feasibly get ourselves into. So hopefully, as we unpack this here today, where did the mouse go? There it is. Okay. So let's talk about to Zap or not to Zap. So,
Yep.
Spot, how would you tee this off here?
So the first, right off the bat, when we talk about using Zapier or otherwise, the whole point is how do you get data from one place to another? The best way, of course, is a direct integration. So when one app is partnering up to the other using their APIs, and you're going to have either a one-way sync or a two-way sync. One-way sync is where you may connect a different app to QuickBooks Online. And it gets a little confusing here because they may go and suck in certain bits of information initially, like maybe your vendor list or customer list, chart of accounts. They will pull that stuff over in certain transaction types. But then after that initial sync, it will only write data from the external app to QuickBooks Online only one way. It never goes both directions. Now, a two-way sync then probably becomes a little more obvious that it's a situation where once you've done the connection, you pull information back and forth, it can actually write data both directions. And that it's a lot more challenging to code it that way because you have to keep in mind, let's say both programs sent data at the exact same time. Which one takes precedence? Which one is going to be the most important one if they're both trying to update something at the exact same time? And how do you track it with audit logs, everything else? Now, if you don't have a direct integration capability, this is where we start talking about different bridge apps, such as Zapier. And there's other competitors that are out there as well, which if anybody watching has other suggestions, feel free to put in the chat as well. Make is one, Integramat, Integrately, Pabbly, Automate.io. There's probably 10 other ones as well. But Zapier is the Kleenex of all these, where it came out really first and it's got the biggest following of all of them. And we call it a bridge app because what they do is they connect points to the different APIs and allow you a very easy way, like mind map way of connecting these pieces and trying to understand how to put the pieces together. And even cooler is recipes to make it taste good, if you will.
Exactly. So we did do a webinar on Zapier back in 2021. So yes, it deserves an updating. But Heather Day Satterley, she was very heavily integrated.
Oh yeah, she had her whole course on it all, which we all learned from, big time.
Yeah, intro to Zapier. You can check that out. I've got it put on the QB Power Hour page, so you can watch that as well. So if we're maybe talking a little bit differently about how well it sinks in some of these topics that we're talking about here today, you can check that out, and maybe Heather has a better way to resonate with that. Oh, it's not going to start. No, we don't.
And we recorded the whole webinar. You guys can watch the rest. No, just kidding.
And we're done. No.
Yeah. Easy.
But really, what is Zapier? And I think that's what we want to first, foundational wise, it's really just a tool that connects cloud-based applications, and it offers a low code or no code way to connect one app to another, right? Would you say that's a pretty good?
Yeah, I think you nailed it basically. The idea of low code, no code, they use that terminology to motivate people to try it out. As we get into some of the examples, you'll see I use the term mind mapping because it's going to be graphics where you can move around and you can see the pieces that visually you can see what you're building. That's the beauty of this. Because if you look at the API documentation, have fun. There's a lot more involved to that.
Yeah. It makes sense to someone, but it's just the question is whether or not you can actually make sense of it for yourself, because accountants, bookkeepers, accounting professionals, ProAdvisors, this is probably the last thing that you wanted to get yourself into when it comes to managing your clients. But it's not just, as we're talking about the QB Power Hour and how Zapier can help with QuickBooks Online, it connects over 2,000 different applications.
That's
and
huge.
as we'll unpack, not all applications are the same. James was saying in the Q&A, right? Like, how do you know if an app is two-way or one-way or no way,
Yeah.
or are they just making it up? Each of these apps to Zapier offers the same questionable options of how do they integrate with Zapier so that you can integrate with these other apps. It's very powerful in that it allows you to do more things with one action. Now, how much does Zapier cost? It depends. That's the answer for in most cases in our industry. I think there is a free option. You can go check it out on their website, but their pricing matrix is typically based on the type of connection, whether you're using a premium app or a regular app connection. By the way, QuickBooks Online is a premium app. So if you want to have anything doing with QuickBooks, you're going to at least have to go with the professional midway option. You can't use the free option. Then the other pricing consideration is the number of tasks, and we'll talk about what a task is and how you account for the number of tasks, and then the number of people on your team. You can have a team of people and share Zaps between your team members. So there's a link there in the slides on the pricing. But the smallest or the lowest task option is $750 a month. And if you chose that with the professional, that would be like $20 a month, right? So it's not a lot. And then you figure out how many tasks you're actually needing, and then you can figure out what the pricing would actually be. Task accounting. I thought that was funny that on their website they have how do you account for tasks, but what is nice. A task? A task is counted when an action is successful. If something fails, it doesn't count, right? If there's a problem, right? And a successful action is either a read, a write, or a search, right? So if it's pushing something to the app of doing something else, that's considered a task. If it's reading it, pulling in the information so that it can do something with it, then that's a pull. And then searching, you're able to search within the applications that you're connected to. Now, a trigger, and we'll talk about what a trigger is in a little bit, triggers don't count. So in this example, the trigger is an email coming in through Gmail, and then they want to do something with that email. They want to send it to Dropbox and Slack, right? So if 10 emails were received, whatever it's doing into Dropbox is 10 tasks, and then sending the next step of whatever that is after that. DM sent to Slack is also 10. So one Zap can count for 20 different tasks depending on how many steps you have in there. All right. So our next poll question is, have you ever been disappointed by the limited integrations of apps to QuickBooks? It never happened, right? Everyone, Matt, right?
Yeah.
All the applications work splendidly.
People are taking the poll. I'm going to go over real quickly to some of the questions we had. So James was asking a question. So if you send from a CRM to QBO 30 customers, that would count as 30 tasks. So yes, what it would be there is, because it's in that scenario, and we'll go a little bit deeper into it, you're looking at 30 independent records, a record being a customer pushing it over. So therefore it's going to complete 30 different tasks. Mary asks another question, which we'll probably go a little bit deeper into when we show some of the examples, but she was asking, how does it work when you have multiple apps syncing? If all would update a client, address, phone number, et cetera, which app takes precedence, or does the first one change things and then the next one changes it again? The way I used to do something like this, one of the apps I used to do back in the days, I would take an update from my CRM, I would push it over to different CRMs because different ones would collect different places. But if you can actually create a multi-step action where it acts almost as one task with lots of steps or actions within it, and that's a way to not use up as many of your tasks at once by daisy chaining them. But if they're not daisy chained, then you could run into different updating issues where they're fighting over this stuff.
Good fielding of questions there. So let me go ahead and end the poll and share the results. By and large, 77% of you said yes, you're disappointed by some limitation of integrations. Now, don't get too excited. There are plenty of limitations with Zapier as well, right? And we'll unpack some of those as well. It's not going to be the magic pill, silver bullet for all things, but it certainly could be a way to enhance, depending on what it is that you're looking to do. Spot, you want to take these through about as we unpack what is the overview of Zapier?
Yep. So when we're talking about Zapier, it all comes down to triggers versus actions. So after you connect your different applications together, what will happen is Zapier is going to watch for a predefined or defined activity to trigger the start of your own custom Zap. Once a Zap has been triggered, it will follow a series of actions that were signed as a part of your workflow. So when you organize them correctly, these Zaps can replace the need to manually transfer data from one program to another. Trying to break it down in little nuggets to get you really to what the difference in the variance is there. So a trigger leads to the action.
Just like in that example of a firearm, right? That's going to, if you want to have the action of firing a firearm, you got to pull the trigger. Right? So you can only do it one at a time.
So then there's different types of triggers, and they break it down into what they call polling triggers and then instant triggers. The polling triggers, depending on the plan that you're on, it's basically going to do a periodic poll to see if there is information that needs to be, if you need to activate an action. So your free plan is going to be every 15 minutes, it's going to do a search. Professional is 2 minutes, and team and enterprise is 1 minute, basically. The higher up you go, the faster it would be. What that really means is the free plan, this is one of the few times where the free plan of a program, you're not the, as I say, if it's free, you are the product. Zapier's done a phenomenal job. They're not using you as the product anymore. It's a great gateway to get you into the product, to then get you to be willing to pay more and do things even faster. We'll go through when you're doing testing, the time wise, you can do a manual quick push to make sure you're testing your Zap and it's good to go. Now, instant triggers, webhooks. If you've heard of webhooks before, but always wondered what they are, put a 1 in the comments for me, please. What a webhook is with an application, it's when they send out a predefined message on a URL and other applications listen and watch for that that message, and they're going to hook it and pull it in and say, okay, we need this information. So instead of having to always be pulling and looking for this stuff, it just listens for an RSS feed, if you will, an update from a webhook from something else, and grabs it and then takes that as an action. Does that make sense, Dan? Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah. When people would listen for the train on a railroad track, hopefully,
and the pulling trigger is the flying penny. You got it.
Exactly.
So, okay.
There's a train coming, but yeah, this is a great setting the stage as far as when is that trigger going to get pulled. It's going to depend, right? Again, it all depends, right? So what plan you're on and what app you're actually using, do they use the webhooks or not? But if they're using an application, if there's an API that allows for the webhooks, it doesn't matter what plan you're on. Right? It's constantly listening
exactly
for something to happen, right? So with anything else, there's limitations.
Yeah. So the limitation wise, all of this stuff it's basically determined by the different applications API. So in other words, if the application doesn't offer access computer language wise to do something, Zapier can't make it happen at all. So it's only able to do what's available there. and it's only triggered by new data. So what this means is if you're trying to create a Zap and then you want to do your historical stuff, that's not what it's made for. It's it's forward looking. Unless you check out maybe like their Zapier transfer feature, that's something where you could try to pull historical stuff in, of course.
Yeah. Or one option is if your Zap is with a spreadsheet, right? If maybe you have a Google Sheets and then you export whatever it is that you're doing, you have it in the exact same format as a spreadsheet trigger, which one of that triggers could be a new row is created. And you then copy and paste it in bulk into that trigger. Then it's going to go line by line and then potentially. I wouldn't recommend that just because
there goes all your you're going to use all your activities up real quick.
There goes all your tasks.
Yeah.
And then you're going to be paying for additional ones if you're not on the plan. Then there are other applications that will probably do, bulk historical uploads and things like that. Maybe a little better than, especially if we're talking QuickBooks here.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a great point that it's only triggered by new data. So this is like the line in the sand. Hey, we're going to take care of this issue that we're having with this integration gap. Let's move it forward from here and then figure out some other option for the historical stuff.
Now, we should real quickly, before I talk about this other part, we should say again, when you're testing out creating your different Zaps, it will, in that specific scenario, try to pull the last 3 records of information over that you can use to try to push over the data over to a new platform. Only does that during testing. And that's important because you want to make sure things are working correct. And it walks you step by step, shows you the information before you push it over, of course. Now,
so, talk about these action steps.
Yeah. So this is an example as we go through some of these next sections, guys. This is where you really want to probably download these slides. I'll put the link up again for everybody because there's a lot of words on here. There's a lot of different types of steps that can be done within Zapier. So we're talking about when you're trying to figure out what's going to first trigger something. And then if the action, once it's triggered, what's the action it's going to take within the other app? So there's like a search step, as it says here. It's going to be find your existing data. So if you've got an existing customer and you don't want to create a duplicate customer, it can search for it and then use that. You can use filters to create conditional logic type scenarios. Formatting, so you can make sure your time is formatted correct. Maybe your dollars, is it currency versus percentage, different things of that nature. Delay. Delay is an important one because sometimes you need to, if you're doing a multi-tiered step, you need to give time for something to update and finish before you go to the next piece. And then paths, which is pretty cool. And Dan's got kind of an example of one of those towards the end to blow everybody's mind of conditional logic where you start to branch things off. And you can make one crazy, insane Zap that moves things a lot of different places, right?
Yeah. So these are things that you can add in between your actions to get more out of, right? Because maybe a transaction comes over to QuickBooks with the decimals in the wrong place, right? You can use this numbering formatter to make sure that's entered in the right way.
And then, so fields wise, there again, many different types of fields that could be used. You've also got your date and time field. You've got a dictionary field, which this is something I haven't used enough of, and it's pretty powerful. You can literally create 2 columns where one value pops up something and you tell it instead to provide a different value. So an example of that would be like for Stripe, if you have a name of a certain type description on an invoice, it could look for that word and then switch around to something you really wanted to trigger inside of QuickBooks Online. So we've got links back to all of the help guide where this stuff is coming from as well for you. Drop down menus, that's a huge one, of course. So this is where if you want to predefine a selected list of different items, you've got your file field. So This is great if you want, let's say you've got one app that creates a downloadable PDF for you. You could then take it and have that Zap grab that file and attach it and push it into maybe QuickBooks Online by having it select the file field in the way you would map it out. Then line item fields. This is a little deceptive. So line items are subsets of individual items. One of the limitations, I think we talked about it a little bit later, is in QuickBooks Online, we were playing around before this trying to see if they'd updated the ability. You can't create multiple line item invoices or sales receipts, but in other type of programs, there's different line items of data. You could use that in this scenario then.
And
list
keeps
fields, going. I know they keep going. So list fields, number, decimal, we talked about those. Password fields. So if you need to push a password over, you could do that as well. Again, download these slides and you'll be able to go through a lot of this without having to read all the words right away. String text, true, false, Boolean wise, and then custom modal fields. This is where you can basically create your own mapping of different fields between different programs and different answers. That's something you end up using quite a bit.
Now, if your brain's not full yet, there are other things in Zapier as well that can even augment this even further. Like they have their version of a spreadsheet where you can have Zap tables where you can store a lot of things in a spreadsheet, so you don't have to necessarily have Google Sheets, for example, to be your source of truth for your spreadsheet. You can just keep it all in the Zapier. There's a chatbot option. I haven't really played around with that yet. I don't know. Have you?
No, not yet.
Any of the AI stuff as well?
And real quickly, Erickson, so what does not have an icon mean? A lot of these, they've created custom little icons so they're easier to spot and know what part of it you're using. When it says it does not have an icon, that's what that means. It doesn't show you like a little icon on the side. It's not pronounced by that icon.
All right. So let's now talk a little bit about how Zapier can help with QuickBooks Online. Here's the tie-in to QB, to the QB part of the Power Hour. So here's a listing of the QBO triggers, right? So anything that is an account, product, customer, project, vendor, you can read these at your leisure, transactional information, these can be triggered or triggers. And we'll talk about that, one of the simpler ones, because there was a Facebook post on our group I thought this might be a good example of using. How do I get alerted when my customer creates and modifies their chart of accounts, right? Maybe they're handling things in the bank feed, and sometimes they create new accounts, or QuickBooks creates the new account because they're trying to type in or find it, and then they add an S or something like that to the category or the chart of accounts, and then it creates a new chart of accounts, which only makes work for you to go back and figure out how that got created, do I have to merge it and whatnot. Maybe you want to get alerted when an account is made or when a customer is made. You can trigger that from QBO. And correct me if I'm wrong, this is an active listening trigger, yes, right? So
correct.
It's immediate. It's not you're not gonna wait 15 minutes to alert you with that, right?
Yeah, so QuickBooks Online started using webhooks about 4 years ago, I think is when they really started to initiate them. So you can use the webhook version of it. You don't have to do anything fancy to do it that way. I do want to draw attention, the ones that say new and update, just in case there's a question on it. That means as a trigger, any of those, so customer, bill, estimate, invoice, and credit memo, those are the only ones that if there's already something created, but they update, that would also trigger an action.
Or could potentially be your trigger.
Yeah.
So here's all the things that you can do inside of QuickBooks as far as an action. This is not, a trigger doesn't have to mean the action. This could be something else, and then something that you want an action that you want to take inside of QuickBooks. Quite a few, right? There's a lot of things that you can do here. I haven't played around with the API requests yet, or the get attachments. I am intrigued by that get attachments as well. Maybe you can take that attachment and put it somewhere else. If they upload a receipt, and maybe you have a document storage that is not QuickBooks, right?
Correct. As just again, I think everybody got this, but when we're talking about the trigger part, that is, you're using something in QuickBooks Online to trigger another action, which could be into a different application. The actions are when some other program triggers something to happen, and your action will happen inside of QuickBooks Online, is the difference there.
Exactly.
Limitations.
Yeah. Here's Dirty Harry again. He's showing up with his, man's got to know his limitations. Transactions, and we mentioned this earlier, transactions are created to either one item or category. And before you say, hey, why not use a bundle? Bundle items are not supported. We're very sad to find that it's not been included in their update yet. So if you wanted to create a bundle and then have multiple line items from that bundle, sorry, it's not an option yet. So for bills, expenses, all the transactions, it's really only going to allow you to do one line item on that transaction. And for fields or for list items like customers and vendors and products and services, not all fields for lists are going to be available. And then, of course, our custom fields. When it comes to that's always on the list of things that it doesn't integrate with.
That's a good example of API limitations, right? Because all the custom fields aren't necessarily available, you can't access all those different things. Previously, tags you couldn't. Now you definitely won't be able to, of course. But so if you can't get to if you can't get to it through the API, if you ever have a question on that, you can reach out. I can tell you. You won't be able to do it with any of these kind of programs. And Lynette, I see your questions. We'll get to those here just shortly.
Okay. And then once you set this up, sometimes it will require some maintenance, right? The great thing about QuickBooks is it's constantly updated. The bad thing about QuickBooks is it's constantly updated, right? That could have an impact on a Zap that you might have set up, in which case you may need to update your connection to the Zap. It may break. An update to QuickBooks may hinder the Zap's ability to do something. And so if you've got this really long multi-step Zap created and any one of those gets updated, that could potentially cause a challenge in that Zap running error-free. When there is an error, you'll get an email alert, say, hey, we can't run this. And at best, the layman's terms of how they can help you out. I don't know if you've gotten some of those errors, Matthew. You know what it is by looking at it. Okay, this is a challenge, but it's sometimes very developer focused of string HTTP.
They do a really good job. So the reason we're even able to show this image right now, Dan and I, before this, we got together and we were meeting and we were just brainstorming different concepts of things we could try to show. And we found as we were doing it on a lot of my older ones, I had to update my QuickBooks Online connection. And it's because the API had changed. I hadn't been really using Zapier as much to push stuff in and out of QuickBooks Online. So I had to go in and update it. And it does a good job on existing Zaps of giving you like a warning and walking you through, click this to re-update it. So you're not going crazy. But the key takeaway from this is Zapier is amazing, but you do need to maintain it. So if you're really leaning heavily into this, any platform like this, you need to put it on your counter to just do regular maintenance, make sure things are connected correct. It'll make your life a lot better by doing that for sure.
One thing that I had noticed is that if you do get an error, and it stops the Zap from running. When you fix it, you can't rerun that Zap
Point.
fix that new iteration, because it records just like Google Sheets. There's always this version history of things that anytime that a change is made, it assigns the version that was used to that Zap run in that history. So even if you fix it, you can't rerun it unless you start the trigger again, right? So once whatever caused the Zap to run in the first place, if you do it again, then it will take the new version of your Zap with your changes.
Which means if it broke for a month or two and you don't fix it, you don't get to go back 2 months and start to rerun those. That, because again, no historical, from the point you fix it, it will start to do new future stuff, but the historical's toast, right?
Yeah. And I think when I was reaching out to Zapier support, I think they were trying to investigate how to do that. So I may be, probably a month from now, this is already going to be outdated with that, and you might be able to use a new version, but that's probably in a future state. Right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about some examples. So we'll go with a simple one, and then go into a little bit more immediate, and then a more advanced one. A simple Zap would be a trigger to a single action, right? So one action creates one result. This would be a good example used in the free plan that they have, because you can't do anything more than just have one action, right? But you can't use premium apps with the free one. So this will be something where you would be the apps that do connect, and we'll share some links of how do you tell what apps do in Zapier. There'll be links for that on the website as well. But here's an example of the ProAdvisor wants to be alerted when a new account is created on the chart of accounts. And you have some other simple examples, Matthew. So that in this particular case of multi-factor security tokens.
In my practice, we've been using Dialpad for our phone system for a very long time. And we've always set up a separate phone line we call our security line. And we needed a way to make sure that whoever's requesting the token could get that token, including my global team in India, because I don't want to answer those questions at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. So with Dialpad, we have the ability because it would integrate to Slack, we could take and set up to where the text message went straight to Slack. But because we were more of a Microsoft Teams family, I needed to get it from Slack over to Teams. And I was able to set up just a quick Zap and be able to push it from Slack over to Microsoft Teams, sending the message right over to a certain channel. And only the person who requested it would know who needed it, basically.
So as an example, Dialpad didn't have a direct integration with Teams.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but it did have
to Slack.
A direct to Slack. So you can send it to Slack, move it over to Teams, because that's what you were using. So this is a great example of augmenting a limitation. So you didn't have to search for another application to do what Dialpad was doing, just so that you could have it show up in Teams for this.
And then another simple example was using, for the longest time, I'd used Toggle for time tracking. And it's more of just quick, easy reports. And when I'm working on something, I can put it at beginning time, ending time, tag it to a customer, that kind of stuff, because I'm not using it for my actual time tracking for payroll myself. So what I did back in the day is I'd always have it set up that when I'd add a new customer in QuickBooks Online, it would automatically create a new client for me in Toggle. So I didn't have to go and set that specifically up each time. I could just go log in and choose the client and start putting my time in to create whatever reports I wanted.
Yeah, and this is one of those things where when you're bucketing your practice or anybody's business, right? There's the 3 Ps of programs, product, processes, and people, right? And if people are doing processes that can be easily done this is a
automatically.
great, this is a great use case for something like this, allowing you to automate what's possible to automate and then humanize that relation that doesn't need a human clicker to do that, right?
Yeah. It's real. Right before you move on to this next piece, it's a good time to actually answer Lynette's as well. But full disclosure, both of those examples I gave, those were examples where certain integrations didn't already exist. Since creating those back in the day, now Dialpad has integration to Teams, and that's going to be more, it's going to be a direct integration, more solid. I don't have to manage it all the time. And Toggle has one to QBO. So this allowed me to plan and make it work to begin with. But now I would move over to the direct integration most likely, so I don't have to manage some of that stuff. And Lynette's question was, so would Zapier be a good choice to integrate Salesforce used as CRM for proposals, invoicing, et cetera, with QBO? Lynette, I'm pretty certain I thought there's already a direct integration to QBO. I know there's third-party apps that can do some of it, but you could do that. I'd have to double check what's available through Salesforce. Yes, you would be able to do that kind of a connection to push stuff in. I've done that a long time ago in the past with a company. So
we'll have a link for how do you tell what triggers and what actions are available for each app. Zapier has a really nice page for all of that to search that out. But you can find the app that you're looking at and see what triggers are available for that app and what actions are available, and then determine if this is even a good way to go. So here's an example of an intermediate. So you have that single trigger, but you have multiple actions that are taken. At Schoolofbookkeeping, we use Kajabi, and Kajabi is kind of like American Express. It does things on its own, maybe doesn't play well with others, right? It wants to be a QuickBooks of the online learning, right? So all these things that they say they do, they want to have it all in one place. But trying to get Kajabi to integrate with QuickBooks, no, not going to happen, right? So this is where Zapier came in to help me out. First thing was a new purchase that would happen. Then I would add a filter. So a filter then is for a certain condition, and you can use all sorts of filtering, right? So you don't want all sales or all actions or all triggers to create this action. So you can filter that out. I wanted a certain types of sales to have this to run this app. Just those two things, the sale and the filter, doesn't cost me any tasks, right? So there's no task usage when it's filtered, right? So putting those filters, so best practice, put the filters up first so that you don't have task usage. So what would happen if the filter was successful, passed through, then what it would do is it would find the customer in my QuickBooks. And then nice part about this app connection with Zapier is that there's really just checkbox to say, if it's not found, create the customer. So rather than creating 2 additional steps, it allows you to search for it first, and then if it's not found, it will find it. And this is where the double-sided sword is here. There's only a few things that you can actually search on, and it's either going to be the display name or the display name. I think it's the display name and the email, maybe those 2 things. So it's not necessarily look for this phone number or look for this. This is where some of those limitations then come in. But as long as you have your workflow laid out there, it will find the customer or create and create it if it's not found. And then after that, it will create a sales receipt in QuickBooks. Another thing that we use it for is also, because it's an online company, shipping address is very necessary for economic nexus. So we want to make sure that the address, even though it's a billing address, that is also copied over into the shipping address, which QuickBooks doesn't do that automatically. So you can have Zapier do that, right? So to make sure that your shipping address and your billing address are in alignment so that the sales tax is going to be utilized properly. It's going to create that sales receipt. And then after that, it calculates some transaction expenses, right? So I'm going to be charged by Kajabi payments or Stripe or whatever the payment processor is. I know what that is. As long as that's consistent, based off of the sale, I can figure out what the expense would be and formatting of dates and those types of things. And then it creates an expense for me as well. So one action of a sale being made on my website is then now either adding the customer, adding a sales receipt, and creating an expense. So I've created basically 3 transactions in my QuickBooks where I want it to go in from one action, right? And, you can more steps. I mean, I don't know if there's a limit of how many steps that you could actually have. Do you know, Matt?
No, because I'm pretty sure it was Brian Clare did a 52-step Zap one time. And I don't even think that maxed it out. But obviously, the larger you go, the more complex it's going to be, the more management that's involved to it. So you can get pretty creative. I think this is where some of using the branches and such, you evolve into the advanced class for sure.
That's right.
Janet was asking, would there be a way to add an attachment to the sales transaction in QBO?
This is, we'd have to check it out to actually see if that gives us if we have time, we might go into that. All right. So here's an example of an advanced one where you have one trigger and then multiple actions with potential multiple outcomes, right? So this is where we talk about, where Matt was talking about the
conditional logic
right?
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is what Zapier looks graphically as you're creating it, right? So you can see where it starts to branch out, where there's 7 different potential outcomes, right? So it is going to result in wherever this ends up, whatever path this chooses, it can't choose multiple paths, right?
Correct.
That's one thing to point out here, is that you typically want to have your paths at the end of your Zap based on that conditional logic, because then you can't rerun it to have it go through the second one. But you can have multiple Zaps with multiple paths. Your end result here could be trigger the next Zap, and then it will run through that again. That does break things up for you so that you don't have this huge monster Zap that you have to manage. But that's one example of, in this case, it was filtering for a certain field, or it was a big form on a website that people were filtering or filling out, and then depending on which option they selected for certain drop downs on that form, it would choose a different outcome. So
I think it goes without saying, but just to say it anyways, if you're doing complex setups like this, do it to a test company. So this is where it's always good to have your own paid playground, because once you get it set up the way you want it, you can then always turn around and change a company it connects to. And this is another great piece here. Sometimes you can make Zaps that fail. You need to have better forward thinking of this. An example being, I'm not a big fan of Twitter X or spending a whole bunch of time there, but I got this great idea. Hey, I'm going to create this image, and every time somebody would follow me, it would zap and post this image up on my Twitter feed. If you don't go in and post anything else on there, it just became a wall of just this picture over and over and over and over again with nothing else. That was a really bad example of a Zap, because I didn't think about future-wise what it would look like and was it really helping or not.
All right, so let's launch the last poll question. Was this information useful? Did you learn something new, or maybe some help with Zapier? So let me go into, so here's our Here's this is my Zapier, and this is a great place. So Zapier.com/apps is a great place to go to evaluate whether this is going to help you or not. So what was the one that people were asking about?
QuickBooks
Butter?
Online attachments. And
No,
Salesforce was the other one, Salesforce.
the nonprofit one that
Give Butter, I think.
Give Butter. So let's search for.
Yeah.
There it is. So let's take a look at. So you search for any app here, and then you go down to here. Oh, this is one other thing that we didn't even talk about was templates, right? So there's tons of templates in there. So you can just find if a template, in this case, update subscribers and MailChimp for new give Butter transactions. You can just start with this template that's already there, and then you don't necessarily have to build it from scratch. But down here,
a QBO right there. They add new Give Butter transactions as payments in QuickBooks Online.
Yeah, so you can just if Give Butter doesn't automatically do it, you can use this app to do that. Down at the bottom here is where you really want to go into investigating whether it does this or not, so you can filter for just the triggers, right? These are the things in Give Butter that will spawn a trigger, right? So a new campaign, a new transaction, a new ticket, and updated campaign. It'll tell you if this is instant or not. So now you know that they have probably a webhooks here at the railroad track, and then you can see what the action is. This would be if it's some other trigger from another app. What could you do
inside of Give Butter? Exactly.
So you can create a contact. And then, so I was just looking, and then you just look at them at the same time, right? So that you can see it all in one place. So you can create a contact, but notice that creating a contact is not a trigger, right? That's like the end of the line. That's what's going to happen as far as an action is concerned. What was the other one?
Salesforce was one.
Yeah, let's take a look at that.
So for years, I've loved going over to Zapier's site to take a look at the different apps that are coming out on the market and what they're available to do. It's going to be, I think it's this one. Yeah. Let's see, new lead, new record, talking about estimates and such.
So let's just look at the triggers here. So it's case attachment, new fields, new lead, new record, updating a record, updating a field on a record, new outbound message. So these are all the things that can be triggered by Salesforce. And then here's all the actions that can be done inside of it. Quite a few. Right?
Salesforce is.
But there's a large number of third-party apps. That's all they do is build those integrations between Salesforce and QuickBooks, for example. But if QuickBooks Online is not your final destination or your integration between these two, this can do all sorts of things elsewhere or back into Salesforce. So one other one that was look at.
The only other question that was right off the bat was asking about trying to add attachments on in QuickBooks Online. But it was get attachments, if I remember correctly. It wasn't add an attachment on.
Where's QuickBooks?
It's not liking it today. Okay.
Where'd it go? And then you can filter these too, right? So if you're just looking at the premium ones, there's QuickBooks right there. Where there's a will, there's a workaround. So action. That was an action. That was an action, right?
Yep. And then
get attached.
There's a lot of them.
Oh, wait, where'd it go? Full F attach. There we go. Get attachments from a record.
So that's going to grab it. That wouldn't be to add it, though. Now, if go to create a sales receipt or update sales receipt, and maybe like two up, there you go. And in here,
these are all, what we're looking at here is these are all the things that can do on a sales receipt.
Good point.
What is not on here is add an attachment, right? So this tells us that it would not allow us to attach a transaction inside of QuickBooks. If the attachment is already in QuickBooks, you can get it, but you're not going to be able to do anything with it back in QuickBooks once you've gotten it.
Yeah. Is add an attachment. Let us know what you find out. You said you can play around with it, or if you get stuck on it, reach out. Best thing you can do is if you get me excited with a very difficult challenge, you're going to get my attention big time. Be like, ooh, let me try to figure out how we can solve it. So send me down a rabbit hole. I love it. So Dan, look at that. We were pretty close to time this time.
Yeah, we crammed all that into 1 hour. We really appreciate you joining us here today. Next, and that's what Spot and I are looking to focus the QB Power Hour moving forward is really uncovering and unpacking the data getting into or out of QuickBooks, because that's really where the QuickBooks ecosystem, especially online, is that there is a shallow end of the pool of all the things that you can do inside of QuickBooks, but that doesn't mean there's not neighboring swimming pools that we can steal some water from, right?
Yep.
And then it all boils down to how that data is moved. So we're going to start looking into, and unpacking some of these apps that do integrate into QuickBooks and what they do well, what they maybe need some help with. And so we wanted to start with this as more of a way of, hey, there's another choice. Even you don't have to abandon your app if it doesn't. There's a way to augment that. Matthew, any closing thoughts?
If you guys have other topics that you are interested to learn more about, reach out to either one of us. We would love to hear your suggestions so we can. Our goal is to help however we can to the community. So thank you for taking the time to be a part of this and joining us every other Tuesday, and appreciate it.
All right. You all have a great Mardi Gras. Enjoy your Ash Wednesday tomorrow, but Fat Tuesday today. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you next time on the QB Power Hour. We hope you enjoyed listening to the QB Power Hour podcast. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in our Facebook group. You can find those resources and much more at qbpowerhour.com.